Hello guys, I hope you've had a good week. We're going to be getting back into the Bible again with another story this week. I'm going to be telling you a story from the book of Daniel, and we're going to be looking at chapter 3. So some of the names in this story are a little bit difficult for me to read, so I've had to write them down on a piece of paper to help me remember the names when I'm telling the story. So this story is set at a time when the people of Israel, or the Jewish nation, had been taken captive, and they had been taken to a place called Babylon. And the king of Babylon at that time was called King Nebuchadnezzar. And this king made a huge gold idol. And at certain times, he required his people to bow down and worship this massive gold idol. And he said that at these particular times, everybody needed to bow down and worship to this golden idol. The king very much wanted to control all the people, so he said that if there were any people that refused to bow down to his idol or his gold statue, then they would be thrown into a fiery furnace where they would burn. And that's a very frightening thought, isn't it? So I think most people did as they were told. But there were three friends. This story is about these three men, actually. Their names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These three men were Israelites. They had been taken captive and they were living in Babylon. And since they'd come to Babylon, actually, they had trusted God. They'd asked God for help in everything they did. They prayed to him often, and they'd actually been very successful and done very well. But some of the king's astrologers didn't trust the Jewish people at all, and they knew that the Jewish people were not happy bowing down to any other god or any false idol except for their true and one and only God. So they were suspicious, and they told the king, King Nebuchadnezzar, that they told him, well, these people, you've told everybody to bow down to your idol, but when the time comes, these men are not doing that. And this made the king very angry, and he said, you need to bring those men to me. And they were placed before the king, and the king demanded that they bow down in front of his idol. And I'm going to read from the Bible. This is what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego actually said to the king when he ordered and told them that they had to bow down to a false god. I'm going to read from Daniel chapter 3. This is verses 16, 17, and 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Now, this was a very courageous thing for these three men to do, because they knew that this king would throw them into this fiery furnace. And when they spoke to him like that, and they told him that they refused to bow down to his false god, then King Nebuchadnezzar was very, very angry, and he ordered his guards to make that hot furnace 7 times hotter than it usually was. This furnace, it wasn't like an oven where you cook. It was like a factory, and it was very, very hot inside, used for melting metal. And he ordered his guards, he said, take these three men, and throw them into the furnace so that they will die in there, because it was so hot. And these three men were taken up to the furnace, and they were thrown into the fire, and the fire coming out of the entrance to that furnace was so hot that actually one of the guards burned and he died. That's how dangerous it was. And after a while, King Nebuchadnezzar was looking into the furnace, and he said, hang on a minute, didn't we just throw 3 men in there? And they looked inside, and instead of just seeing 3 men burning, they could see some men walking around. But in fact, they didn't see 3 men, they saw 4 men. And the king could see that there was no harm coming to them, and he was very, very surprised. And after a while he said, "Come on out of the fire. Just, I can see that your God has saved you." And he asked them to walk out, and they came out of the fire, those 3 men, and the only thing that had burned was the ropes that they'd been tied up with before they were thrown in the fire. Their clothes, their skin, everything looked completely normal. So King Nebuchadnezzar was so surprised that he said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego," because he was able to save these men from the burning furnace. And there's no other God that would be able to do that. Now, do you remember when they were inside the furnace, when King Nebuchadnezzar looked inside, he didn't see 3 men walking around. He saw 4. Now, some people say that it was an angel of God in the furnace with those 3 men looking after them. But some people even think it was Jesus himself, making sure that those 3 men were protected because of their faith that they had in him. Now, do you remember before they went into the furnace, these 3 men, they didn't know if God was going to save them from that furnace or not. They knew that God was able to, and they trusted God completely, but they didn't know what the outcome was going to be. They knew that it was possible that they could have died in that furnace. And this is a really important lesson for us to understand what it means to trust God. This is what faith really means. Faith and trusting God is believing in God, doing the things that he asks of us, even when we don't know what's going to happen in the end. Now, I've got a little craft for us to do today to help us remember this story and to think about how brave those 3 men were to be able to trust in God and to refuse to do something that they knew that God didn't want them to do, which was to bow down to an idol or an image, which was a false god. So let's have a look. What I have here is I've cut some circles out of cards, and on one of those circles I've drawn a fiery furnace. You can see the hot red flames there inside the brick furnace. And on another piece of paper, which I've cut out using scissors, the same size circle. I made these circles by drawing around a cup, if you want to know how I made such perfect circles. And on this one, I've drawn 3 men. You can see Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego standing next to each other there. And what I've drawn behind them is the 4th person that we heard about in the story that was protecting and helping these guys survive the heat of the fire. I've drawn that, imagining that that was Jesus himself in the fire with them, making sure they didn't burn. So what I'd like us to do is to get a stick. Now, if you don't have a stick like this, you could use a pencil or a straw maybe. So I'm going to get some glue, and on one side of the stick, I'm going to have the fire, and on the other side, I'm going to place the people. Now, it's a little bit sciencey, the craft today. I think it's a lot of fun. Let's have a look. Right, I'm going to put some glue on both sides. So on one side, we have the people, and on the other side, people this side, and on this side, a fiery furnace. And because the glue might not dry that quickly, I'm just going to put a little bit of tape just here to hold the stick in place. Otherwise, if you don't put the tape there, it might slide around a little bit. So here we go. There. Do you see how I put the tape on there to hold the cardboard still? So, as always, you know I've made one before. This one is the same thing, but the glue is all nice and dry. So here's my stick. On one side, I've got my fiery furnace, and on the other side, we have the 3 Israelites, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, and behind them, with his arms stretched out, is Jesus, who was in the fire with them, protecting them as a result of the faith that they had in God. Now, Do you remember what happened to those 3 people? Because they refused to bow down to the king's golden statue, they were thrown into a very, very hot fire. Sounds really, really scary. So what I've done here is we've got the hot fire this side, the people this side, and if I spin this, if you look at it very carefully, I'm hoping that you're going to magically see the people safe and sound, but inside the fire. So let's have a look at what happens when I spin this. Can you see? I can see the people inside the fire, but they're not hurt at all by the hot flames. It's clever, isn't it? Right, I hope you have a lot of fun trying to make that, and do your best to remember that story. I'll see you guys soon, I hope.